Hey guys, Matt here. I just got back from the theater a little while ago and just saw Rogue One. I thought I would give a rambly, sort of spoiler-filled discussion for once. So that's basically your warning. I'll say this, spoiler-free. I recommend that you go see this. That's about it. The rest of this is all going to be spoilers. I'm kind of just slapping this one together, guys. I'm going off a short list of notes I've got. And just trying to give you as detailed of thoughts as I can without really going scene by scene. So, forgive me if I jump all over the place. This is not going to be the best video I've ever done. It's just me giving you my thoughts because I want to get in on this before too much time goes by and it's no longer relevant. So I just want to say that I thoroughly enjoyed this movie up front. I'm not really on board with the whole new canon, as most of you probably know. I'm really very much a fan of Star Wars because of the classical expanded universe, which is now referred to as Legends. But having said that, I really enjoyed this movie a lot more than way better than The Force Awakens, to put it simply. Just from the very start, the lack of an opening crawl or the sound of that iconic theme, well, I did miss that. It worked really well for this, given that it's a standalone thing, and it kind of sets this film apart from anything else that we've seen before. And my first impression after having seen the film was, and sort of as I was watching the film, was how very different the film came off from its trailer, like from the feelings and expectations I had after watching the trailers. And I guess that was kind of for good and bad, depending on the scene in question, or even sort of the themes in question and characterization. And again, it's for good and bad. So let's start off with the bad. Jyn Erso's adopted father figure, whose name I can't even remember, it was something Guerrera, like Saw or Saul, whatever. That guy, the guy played by Forrest Whitaker, good performance and everything, but the guy that kind of supposedly took her under his wing, which is what I expected him to be and expected him to do on screen, I felt like he almost didn't even need to be in the movie. It felt like they purged a lot of the scenes that they would have been in and only kept in a few scraps of their relationship, namely the beginning and end, and that's all that really survived. That was really highly inappropriate. It didn't feel much during his really forced sacrifice. I didn't understand his relevance in an overall sense. It just wasn't right. Away from that, some lines and ideas that were on display in the trailer were not here. Jin's overall attitude in the trailer was a little off-putting to me, so I'm kind of glad that she didn't say everything she said in those trailers in this film. So I was happy overall to see a shift in her character. I was also happy that she wasn't Superwoman or another Superwoman, kind of like Rey came off to me. She had vulnerability, but also a lot of strength. She felt... I felt that they got the right tone with her personality, but whatever material they either reshot or cut, I felt ended up robbing her of a lot of any sense of her true purpose with respect to taking charge of the rebellion in the later stage of this movie. I ended up liking the character a lot, but did not feel she had a right to be as impactful as she later became. I don't know if that's a result of the reshoots or differences in like the way that they edited things, or if they just cut stuff. I don't know what's to blame there, but she ends up not really earning her sort of moment in the spotlight toward the end, at least in my opinion. I didn't understand even what she was a criminal for, or why people, the leaders of the Rebel Alliance basically, would conscript her into serving on this little mission of theirs, only to doubt her word later on. Like when she brings them crucial information on how to destroy this Death Star, all of a sudden they're like, we can't trust you. It was all a little too obscure to me, who she was meant to be to them. And I felt it kind of fell on its face a little bit toward the end. Despite this, I want to reiterate that I found her very capable, competent, and relatable. I liked her character. And she was just skilled enough for me to buy her as a force to be reckoned with, but she never went beyond that line and into Mary Sue territory. Switching gears back to another tiny negative, my favorite shot from the trailer wasn't in this movie, as far as I could recall. Unless I missed it, I didn't see it. I'll try to edit that in here somewhere, but whatever. So moving on to things I liked, and basically getting off the subject of how different the movie is from the trailer and just going into something completely different. Something I really liked a lot was the inclusion of aliens, which wasn't in The Force Awakens enough for me. We see some familiar faces pop up. Sometimes it's just a race that I enjoy seeing, such as a Twi'lek, and that really kind of reminds me that I'm in the Star Wars setting. It's a classic alien race. Other times it's a cameo of somebody from the other films. But best of all is that several are shown to be competent and dedicated operatives within the Rebel Alliance, and they actually have some important shit to do. In this case, the Mon Calamari Admiral, whose name I don't remember, was probably the best example I can think of. And it was just neat in general to see aliens doing stuff, because this is Star Wars, and why the hell not? It kind of fleshes out the setting and makes it feel more unique. It invites the filmmakers to use their imagination more. I was really happy to see a lot of aliens and non-humans doing things in this movie. That was something, again, that I really felt was lacking in The Force Awakens. Having said that, there was one misfire in this movie, in Rogue One, that did not really occur to me until it came up in conversation with Antoine Bandelet that I just had. And that would be the octopus thing with mind rape powers. That the Guerrera guy, the Forrest Whitaker again, and also the pilot whose name I don't know, the former Imperial pilot who worked with Jin's father. The octopus mind rape guy. That whole dynamic with that pilot. I'm fine with the creature's design and its mental capabilities, but the lack of a lasting impact that ordeal had on the pilot was really inexcusable. It cut a lot of potential for dramatic tension and character growth with him if he'd actually been forced to work through that adversity. Instead, the script seemed to forget about all of that when the time came for him to be competent again, and they just dumped that shit out the window. So that was a problem for me. And again, a lot of that is because the strength of this film is that it's an ensemble piece. Like, this is really not Jyn Erso's story. Like, this is the crew of Rogue One, like the people on this mission. They're the focus, and while she is the main component of that, the film she shares a lot of the spotlight with these other folks. And for that particular character, the pilot, I felt like, after talking with Antoine especially, I really feel that would have the ordeal he went through with that octopus mind rape thing carry on into his performance as the film goes on. Like, maybe that's why he crashes the ship. Maybe that's that feeds into sort of not incompetence but sort of blunders on his part, and he really gets to work through that adversity and redeem himself later on, which he does. He does do that in a sense, but it would have been more impactful had that particular alien's capabilities been shown to have a lasting impact. That was another problem I had, come to think of it, with Poe Dameron in The Force Awakens. Him basically having his mind broken into by Kylo Ren, and immediately after that he's like completely non-affected by that, and I didn't buy that. I want to see scenes like this have a lasting impact on characters somewhere down the road, but that's just me. Moving on, the relationship between Jyn and her father, whose name I think was like Galen or something, Galen Erso, who's played by Mads Mikkelsen, who's an awesome actor. It was that relationship between father and daughter. It was much more positive than I expected it to be based on what I'd seen in the trailer. And I ended up liking that a lot. That's all I'm really going to say there. That's all I really have to say. But of course, that relationship comes to a dramatic end, and I liked the fallout from that in the direct aftermath. The character Cassian, who I haven't really talked about much, and who I don't know the actor's name, but I thought he played the character very well. The character himself I was kind of put off by him at first because he does some pretty questionable things, but I found him really engaging at about this moment in the film, because in the moment when he and Jin come to blows after her father's death, which she feels he caused, which isn't technically true, that whole scene was great. And it's the first time I felt that Cassian had some substance to him. It's the first time that I felt he really got a moment to explain his side of the story. And he responds to what she says, and while she doesn't accept him or accept what he has to say, he doesn't back down from it. And I felt that both characters were very honest. The conversation itself was a little scripty. The scene played out the way that I thought it would. It was a little predictable, but it also played out the way that I thought it should, given what was going on. I liked what was going on. I felt it was very true, that's where both characters would be with respect to each other after the death of Jin's father. I felt that both characters were entitled to what they said to each other, and what they had to say was both, while completely at odds with one another, they were both correct in their own ways, and I really appreciated that. And especially because it gave Cassian a moment to own up to the fact that he knows he's done some questionable things, because prior to that I didn't really feel one way or the other about where he stood on that line. It had been kind of pushed in his face by various other characters throughout the film. Donnie Yen's character, most especially, had kind of floated this idea out to Cassian's face, but he hadn't really been confronted with this or given an opportunity to explain his side of his take on things until this moment, and I thought that was really necessary. And switching gears again, Cassian's droid, whose name I don't know, I think of K2 something, I don't know. Awesome character. His droid ally was wonderful. He kicked so much ass. He was in many ways the heart of this film, and I felt that the audience was most engaged whenever he was around. He ticks a lot of the same boxes that you look for when this sort of companion droid character that cropped up a lot in the classical EU, whenever that character whenever that kind of archetype would appear, he ticks a lot of those boxes. While I think a lot of folks will probably compare him to HK-47, probably because of the sarcasm thing, he's ultimately a very different character. He's actually got a lot more in common with I-5YQ. For those of you who are familiar with the stories of Lorne and Jax Pavan, you'll know what I mean. I recommend, to be introduced to that character, I recommend reading the novel Darth Maul Shadowhunter and I-5YQ. If you enjoyed Cassian's droid companion, you'll very much enjoy I-5YQ, I think, just by the way. Getting back on topic, I loved every scene with this droid, just about everything he said and did. I will say, though, that the one scene I'm not entirely sold on is his death scene. I really felt the music could have been a little better there. I felt the moment could have been even more intense and tragically heroic if it had had a different score. But that's really my one and only gripe where that's concerned. And in general, while the music wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, I wasn't thrilled with the music in this film the way I would like to be, aside from a few scenes. There were a few scenes where they really nailed it, especially toward the end. Now, moving on, I want to make the point that very quickly here, the Rebel Alliance, because I thought this was interesting, I liked that the thing that gives the Rebels hope is only brought about by some suicide mission that was carried out as an act of defiance in response to the Alliance's own inaction. Rogue One is just that. They've gone rogue, you know? On a thematic and sort of ironic level, that really worked for me. Despite this, as I stated earlier, I don't feel that the film truly set Jyn Erso up as the one to be the figure around which all others rally when it's time to take care of business. I wanted her to be that. The movie wants her to be that. The movie makes her that, but it doesn't really feel as though it's earned. I feel like just more could have been done to make that really fly. And because of all this, I was actually more interested in the Imperial side of the story rather than the Rebels. The characterization of Director Krennic and his rivalry with Governor Tarkin, the interactions with the Darth Vader, all that politicking and scheming and backstabbing, all of that felt so right. It was excellent. Krennic himself was a very strong character, and one I felt for on a tiny level. He was no Admiral Ozzel. Like, this guy was in the wrong places at the wrong times. He was being undermined at every turn, but he never gave up. He never stopped fighting for his position or trying to prove himself. And as much as this literally blows up in his face in the end, I still found him a compelling villain, and he could have very easily been a throwaway character of no consequence, like a lame stand-in for Tarkin, and he's very much his own character. Having said that, while not like a groveling incompetent, he still makes a lot of mistakes, and he still kind of sets himself up for a lot of his own hardship, and I think that that's really appropriate. And the actor they chose, I don't know his name, but I've only ever seen him in The Dark Knight Rises, where he played the Daggett character that was at odds with Bane's management style, basically, who was trying to have his company absorb Bruce Wayne's. I wasn't thrilled with his performance in that movie, and I had concerns about him screaming and shouting and just coming off as completely, ineffective in this movie, because that's, and arguably that's, I want to rephrase that. I wasn't displeased with that performance in The Dark Knight Rises, because that was perfectly appropriate for that character. I did not want to see that character here running the show in Rogue One. And in many ways, he's sort of an upgrade from that character, but at the same time, he's sort of hindered by a lot of things, including his rivalry, his poor relationship with Tarkin, and also his appeal to Darth Vader goes nowhere because Vader's so above all this and doesn't see the point of this. And I thought that was all really great. And in short, I liked this character a hell of a lot more than I expected to, and that's really what I'm trying to say. I was really on board with Director Krennic, and he provided a good, understandable villain for this. One of my problems with The Force Awakens, I was constantly confused. From the start of this film, pretty much all the way through its entirety, I knew what was going on, and a lot of that was because Krennic really provided a tangible, understandable, and ever-present sort of villain, whereas Tarkin and Vader kind of loom over all this, as opposed to taking center stage for the vast majority of this film. And on that note, I did really love what Tarkin himself brought to this. Tarkin himself was a wonderful presence in this film. While the effectiveness of the digital enhancements was a little suspect at times, it was questionable. It was a great job as far as, it was as good a job as I think could have been done under these circumstances. And what they did, I thought it was great seeing him again. I also liked the dynamic again, like I said, between him and Krennic, and I also loved the scene where toward the end where Tarkin does his part in taking out the rebels, but by blowing up, well, actually not taking out the rebels, but to defeat this effort and to attempt to prevent anything similar from happening by destroying Scarif, or whatever the planet was called, and and he shows his superior understanding of Vader and what Vader's all about and what Vader's capable of by saying he will leave the fleet to Vader. That implied a lot, and it was instantly paid off, but we'll get to that later. But back to Krennic and Vader, that dynamic. I loved the scene where Krennic showed up at Vader's cheesy as all hell villainous lair of doom. That was amazing. So well done. That was cheese done properly. I loved that. That was so comic book, so sci-fi, and so over the top, but I loved it. The best thing about that scene, though, was not just the staging or lighting or location or the acting, which were all very well done and effective. It was Vader's singular line about the Death Star having proven itself to be more of a nuisance than anything else. The station had only proven its ability to cause problems from where he was concerned, and that is so absolutely in keeping with his character. I thought that was fantastic. I don't really want to go on about this all day. And so just to kind of wrap this up, while it was predictable that the crew of, or basically the members of Rogue One, were pretty much doomed, calling into question the point of whether or not this story needed to be told from like an out-of-universe perspective, from the perspective of audience members or moviegoers in general. I think it's not. I'm firmly of the opinion that this story really didn't need to be told. My Star Wars experience did not need to include this. The story stands well enough on its own without this, and it always did. Having said that, I'm very glad that they did tell this story because of how well executed this was. I don't care about all the little cameos or callbacks and references, nice though some of those were. This makes references to the prequels. It talks about stuff that's gone on in the new extended canon. It refers to a few things from the Legends mythos. But what was really... it kind of redefines a few terms as well, which I'm not so thrilled about. But it doesn't really matter to me in the context of whether or not I enjoy this film. I was just flatly entertained by this. And that's all I really care about. I love Star Wars for the expanded universe, but separating my enjoyment of all that and just focusing on this film, I was thoroughly entertained. And it was rewarding to see just how much heart and effort, how much resolve went into stealing those plans. And this is where I've got to bring up Darth Vader. Oh my God, did they ever knock it out of the park with him? Excellent. What more can I say? I loved everything from the moment Tarkin said he'd leave the Rebel fleet to Vader. The way his Star Destroyer just exited hyperspace to slam into that fleet was just so perfect. That was Darth Vader taking control and just cleaning up somebody else's fuck up in his own unique, bold fashion. Like that was him taking charge of a bad situation and dealing with it the way Darth Vader does. And seeing just how close he came to getting his hands on those plans and the way he unleashed all that he was on those common beings who gave their lives to give the galaxy a fighting chance, that was awesome. I don't know where else to go from here, so like I said, wrap this up. Overall, it was a suicide mission, and it gave me the same. Overall, the movie gave me the same kind of sense that I had with, and that I and most people, I think, had with Mass Effect 3, and I felt Mass Effect 3 went a little too strongly in that sort of dismal direction, but in this context, it was perfectly acceptable. In part because the Star Wars story, in the course of the rest of the saga itself, has a more fulfilling conclusion within the original trilogy films. For a standalone, though, this was pretty much as good as I think a film that's intricately tied to the previous film's stories can be, and for that I will cherish and remember the sacrifice of these particular rebels. Having said that, I'm not saying I'm a convert. I'm not saying that I'm convinced that I'll be on board with everything else that Star Wars will do in the coming years, but I am happy with this. As a final point, I would like to note that I only ever saw The Force Awakens once in theaters, and I do not own a copy of it. I will be adding Rogue One to my collection, and I will be seeing it again on the big screen with some other friends of mine. A job well done, and I highly recommend it. Thanks for sitting here and listening to me ramble for too long about all this. See you guys later.